Ladies and gentlemen, there are moments, quiet, suffocating, and dim, when the world feels deaf to our cries and blind to our burdens. In such hours, when neither friend nor fortune can soothe the ache, we are tempted to believe that heaven too is silent. But silence is not absence. The stillness of God is often mistaken for apathy, when in fact it is the space where trust is tested and souls are shaped. There is a sacred stillness that settles over the heart when one realizes they are seen, not by the crowd or the people they seek approval from, but by the quiet, watchful eyes of God. Pain has a way of isolating us. It speaks in silence, in long nights, in unanswered messages, in empty rooms. It tells us we are alone, forgotten, invisible, and so we begin to wonder whether even God has noticed. Yet the truth is that God sees more clearly in the silence than we do in our noise. His observation is not like human attention, which is distracted, temporary, or conditional. His gaze is steady, faithful, and full of compassion. He sees not only what is happening to us, but what is happening inside us. There are tears we never show, thoughts we are ashamed to think, and cries we dare not voice aloud. These too he hears. There are heartbreaks so layered, so quiet, they never escape the chambers of our own hearts. Yet they reach heaven like a thunderclap. To us they feel small or even childish. To him they are sacred. The God who fashioned every star, who carved the path of every ocean current, does not overlook the cry of the one. He does not miss the shaking hands trying to pray or the quiet sob in a dark room. He is not absent. He is not indifferent. Sometimes we imagine that if he really saw, he would intervene immediately. We equate his love with immediate rescue, but love is not always intervention. Sometimes it is presence. Sometimes it is the refusal to interrupt a process that is growing something eternal in us. When God is silent, he is still there. When he does not stop the pain, he is still watching over us, not because he enjoys the suffering, but because he is doing something in it that we do not yet understand. The silence is not abandonment. It is a place of trust, a test of whether we believe he is who he says he is, even when we cannot see the evidence. To be seen by God is to be known in the fullest sense. It means every hidden fear, every shameful memory, every flicker of doubt, and every private ache is fully known. And yet we are still loved. We are not just tolerated in our weakness, we are deeply cherished. This knowing does not always remove the pain, but it gives the pain meaning. It assures us we are not suffering pointlessly, that nothing is wasted in the hands of a God who sees all. So even when you feel invisible to the world, remind yourself, heaven is watching. Not with cold indifference, but with tender care, not with distant observation, but with divine intimacy. You are seen. Every sigh, every tear, every prayer you couldn't even form into words, he has heard them. And in his perfect time, the one who watches will also act. There comes a moment in every soul's journey where control becomes too heavy to bear. We grip tightly to outcomes, plans, and timelines, believing that if we just hold on tighter, everything will fall into place. But control, for all its false promises, brings no peace, only exhaustion. It is an illusion, a burden not meant for human shoulders. The truth is this: when we finally lay our struggles down and surrender them into God's hands, we don't fall into chaos. We fall into grace. The world tells us to take charge, but heaven calls us to let go. And that letting go is not an act of giving up, but a sacred act of trust. To surrender is not to be passive, nor is it to stop caring. It is, instead, to stop carrying what only God can carry. It is to confess that while we are responsible for obedience, the results are not in our control. When we finally admit that we are limited, we make room for the one who is limitless. In this surrender, peace is born, not from circumstances changing, but from the deep assurance that someone far wiser is in charge. God's hands are not clumsy. They do not fumble. What is placed there is safe. even when we do not see how or when it will be restored. We often fear surrender because it feels like vulnerability. It feels like admitting weakness. But what if weakness is the very thing God uses to show us His strength? What if we are most free when we are least in control? It is in the relinquishing that we are released. We were never meant to orchestrate every detail of our lives. That burden is divine, not human. God asks for our trust, not because He needs it, but because we do. Trusting Him means believing that His plan, though mysterious, is wiser than our demands. It means choosing rest over anxiety, even when the path ahead is not clear. And so we are invited, not forced, not pushed, but gently invited, to place our pain, our fear, our uncertainty into hands that bled for us. These are not distant hands or careless ones. They are hands that understand suffering, that carry wisdom, that work with infinite precision. In surrender, we lose our fear, not because the storm disappears, but because we are no longer trying to steer the ship alone. Peace is not the absence of trouble. It is the presence of God in the midst of it. To leave it in His hands is the first true act of rest. It is where the heart stops striving and starts trusting. It is not easy, but it is beautiful. And once you've placed it there, you will wonder why you ever thought you could hold it better. You will learn that what you gave up was not control, but anxiety, and what you gained was the quiet strength of knowing you're no longer walking alone. Pain often feels like punishment. When suffering enters our lives, whether through loss, rejection, disappointment, or inner turmoil, we instinctively search for reasons. Did we do something wrong? Has God turned away from us? These questions arise because we see pain as something to be avoided at all costs. Yet, the truth is far more profound. Pain is not always a sign of divine displeasure. Often, it is evidence of divine preparation. Just as a sculptor must chisel stone to reveal beauty, so too does God allow the sharp edges of hardship to shape us into something greater than we currently understand. We live in a world that chases comfort and escapes suffering, but that is not where character is forged. The soul is not strengthened in ease. It is strengthened in endurance. The deepest lessons of love, faith, patience, and hope are rarely learned when life goes smoothly. They emerge when everything falls apart, and yet we choose to believe anyway. The valley is not a place of death. It is the place where faith grows roots. In our desperation, we pray more earnestly, seek more sincerely, and cling more tightly to God. That is not failure, that is formation. God is not careless with our pain. He does not allow it arbitrarily or cruelly. Every sorrow we experience passes through the filter of His love and purpose. We may not understand it in the moment. Indeed, we often don't. But time and reflection reveal that trials have a way of producing gold within us. There is a maturity that blossoms in the soul who has suffered and still remained faithful. There is a wisdom that only comes through the wound, a gentleness that only emerges after breaking. And while pain may not be good in itself, it can be used for good. That is the mystery of divine craftsmanship. We must stop assuming that God's silence during pain means abandonment. Sometimes He does not remove the thorn because the thorn is doing something holy. It is unmaking our pride. It is exposing our dependence. It is turning our eyes heavenward. When we begin to see suffering not as a prison, but as a preparation, everything shifts. The question changes from, why is this happening, to what is God growing in me through this? That shift transforms despair into endurance, and endurance into hope. And so, pain does not mean God is far. It may actually mean He is closer than ever, chiseling, refining, sanctifying. We may not enjoy the process, but we can trust the one who holds the tools. One day, We will look back and see how the very moments we begged to escape were the ones that drew us closest to Him. We will understand that the darkness wasn't meant to crush us, but to uncover the light already placed within. Pain in the hands of God is never wasted. It is purposeful. It is transformative, and it is always preparing us for something greater than we can now imagine. We live in a world ruled by clocks and calendars. We measure progress by deadlines, growth by speed, and success by how quickly things happen. So when God delays, when prayers go seemingly unanswered and dreams remain distant, we interpret it as neglect or denial. Yet divine timing is not human timing, and heaven does not consult our schedules when unfolding its purposes. What feels like a delay to us is, in truth, an exact appointment in the mind of God. The Creator of time does not rush because He is never late. He operates not by the urgency of emotion, but by the certainty of eternal wisdom. Our frustration often stems from the illusion that we know what is best and when it should happen. But we see only a sliver of the story, a single frame in a vast film. God sees the whole timeline, beginning, middle, and end. He knows not only what we want, but also what we are ready for. And readiness is a matter of the soul, not the schedule. We may cry for a breakthrough, a healing, or a resolution, but God, in His mercy, may withhold it, not to punish us, but to prepare us to receive it rightly. There is nothing more dangerous than receiving too soon what we are not yet mature enough to carry. When God delays, it is not denial, it is often protection. Waiting refines our character, stretches our patience, and detaches our hope from outcomes and anchors it instead in God Himself. It teaches us that faith is not proven in fulfillment, but in endurance. Can we trust God even when the promise is nowhere in sight? Can we still believe when the years are long and the silence is thick? These are the moments that define our relationship with Him, not when things go our way, but when they don't. The waiting season is holy. It is not empty time, it is active shaping. During the apparent pause, God is aligning circumstances, opening doors, and more importantly, forming us on the inside. Perhaps the delay isn't about what God is doing externally, but who He is making us into internally. A fruit that ripens too early spoils quickly, but that which ripens in season, in time, bears lasting sweetness. Faith, then, is not just believing that God can do it. It's trusting that He will do it when it is best, not when we think it's best. Every second of waiting is filled with divine intention. We are not forgotten in the delay. We are being developed, and the God who began the good work will finish it. Not a moment too late, and not a moment too soon. So when it seems like heaven is slow to answer, remember, you are not stuck. You are being positioned. Trust the one who writes not in haste, but in holiness, whose timing is not delayed, but deliberate. What is coming will come when it should, and when it does, you will know it was worth every moment of the wait. Tears, though often hidden, are among the most honest expressions of the soul. In moments of profound pain or loss, words fail, and all that remains is the silent language of sorrow. We tend to view these moments as weakness, as if tears signify a lack of faith. But in reality, they are the evidence of a heart being softened, reshaped, and made fertile for something far deeper. Faith does not grow in sterile, easy conditions. It flourishes in the soil of tears, where the heart is broken enough to be open and quiet enough to listen. The world celebrates strength, independence, and self-sufficiency. But God works in the opposite direction. He draws near to the broken-hearted, not the self-sufficient. He exalts the humble, not the proud. And often, He chooses the path of pain to produce the kind of character that easy living never could. We want faith to come through knowledge, clarity, and comfort. But more often than not, it is through suffering that we learn to truly trust. When everything else is stripped away and there is nothing left to cling to, we finally grasp his hand, not out of religion, but out of desperation. And that is where real faith begins. Tears teach us to pray differently. They take us beyond rehearsed phrases or shallow requests. When we are in the depths, our prayers are raw, real, and unfiltered. There is no performance before God, only honesty, and it is that honesty that invites his presence. In our tears, we learn to cry out not just for outcomes, but for his nearness. We stop asking simply for answers, and we begin to ask for him. Pain has a way of clearing the noise, refining our desires, and teaching us that the greatest gift is not relief, but relationship. Tears also connect us with others. In suffering, pride is stripped away, and we become more compassionate, more human, more aware that others carry hidden wounds too. The person who has cried deeply is often the person who loves deeply. They become more patient, more forgiving, more merciful, not because they are naturally good, but because pain has taught them what it feels like to be helpless and held. God does not waste a single tear. In his economy, every drop becomes part of a greater redemption. Faith born from comfort is often shallow, but faith born from struggle is tested, anchored, and resilient. It does not depend on feelings, nor is it shaken by delay. It stands not because the path is easy, but because the foundation is sure. If your pillow has been soaked with tears, know that something sacred is growing beneath the surface. God sees it, he honors it, and in his time, the harvest of that sorrow will be joy that the world cannot take away. So do not despise the tears. Let them fall. Let them teach. Let them lead you closer to the one who never wastes a wound. In the end, your faith will not just survive. It will shine.